he was on the forefront, ushering in this new era of superstar athlete. He redefined what it meant to be a superstar athlete. He became an icon on the same level as Princess Diana and the Pope. I don't think anyone was more famous than him when he was at his peak. And so today we're going to really kind of go through the chronologically, but really focusing on his family, his childhood, his roots, that foundation that created his confidence, his drive to win, which is insane. Everyone who's seen the documentary knows this. We're going to rehash some of that, but we're always going to kind of tie it back into these traits, these foundational, these building blocks of resilience, and we're going to relate everything he's been through and how he's exemplified resilience, exemplified self-awareness, confidence,
Yeah,
passion.
all the things we talk about, man,
Exactly.
always come back to this, and that, and how, in the end, his story and sort of the true mark of his legacy and his craftsmanship, as a champion, was through mental fitness, right? Just mastering the game, uh, starting out with physical dominance, but ultimately, in the end, it all coming together with being able to control the game with his mind,
Mm-hmm.
and his mental toughness, and,
Yeah.
and ultimately, like you said, his resilience.
Yeah. He exemplified everything that we've talked about. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about that foundation, his family. That's where it starts. It starts with your family. It starts with your genetics.
Absolutely.
This is someone who had a very strong core nucleus of a family. He was born in, well, he's actually born in New York, but very briefly spent all of his childhood in Wilmington, outside of Wilmington, North Carolina. And his family, the Jordans, they were well entrenched in that city, in that area in the South. It was somewhere where there was 5 generations of Jordans before him. If you go back to his great great grandfather, John Jordan, he was born a slave in 1862, and that through that lineage over the years, it just kind of shows the perseverance of his family, and those traits carry on within him, even though he wasn't
Absolutely.
there back then, and even though he didn't grow up with Jim Crow laws and all these tough things going on in the South at that time. His family did, and a lot of that sets that kind of genetic code and that foundation for a lot of what he's shown throughout his entire career. And I think ultimately you see that with his relationship with his family, with his hometown. He owns
Oh yeah, man.
he owns the Charlotte Hornets now. He owns a team, an NBA team in his
Isn't that
his home
something? Yeah,
state.
should be no surprise. Right there.
I want to talk a little bit about his father. So his father, James Jordan, Air Force, a fellow alum of the Air Force, uh,
That's
like
wild. Yeah,
like
no, it's
you,
great.
Dr. Hose.
And it makes sense, man. Like, having a military background myself, I can imagine that he really was concerned about discipline for his children, and discipline in the sense of, like, preparing them for life, in terms of, doing things the right way,
Mm-hmm.
hard work,
Yep.
sacrifice, dedication,
Mm-hmm.
dependability,
Yeah, absolutely. So his
reliability.
and that's who his father was someone that was dependable and reliable. He worked at a electrical factory. He was a supervisor. Michael Jordan came from like an upper middle class, working class family. His mother also worked. She was a bank teller, Dolores Jordan, um, and they provided their children with a lot. Michael had 4 siblings, and like you mentioned, both his mother and his father kind of set the tone with their own individual work ethics that I'm sure they learned from their parents and the parents before them. And that was the number one
Absolutely.
thing they preached. And his mom even ended up writing children's books later on. And so you got a real insight into her parenting philosophy where she
That's cool.
talked
So she's a teacher.
yeah, yeah.
She's a
So
teacher. She's an
mhm.
educator. An educator. Wow.
And one of the things she said is saying you want something is fine and well. a good start, but doing something about it is what really counts. So it was all about action,
Right.
and it was all about working hard towards your goals in order to achieve your goals, and not letting anything get in your way of achieving those goals.
Oh, I love that. I
And
love that. Yeah. No,
hard
that's
work,
great.
hard work. We
Hard
can't
work.
preach
Yeah.
this enough. Is the number one thing that they taught Michael and his siblings, and that is the one thing that I've read different things. Um, there's been several books written about Michael Jordan. Let me find the name of this book real quick. Um, there's a book called The History of Flight, where the author goes into detail about how that this hard work, they a lot of individuals, and especially individuals from that grew up in the country or grew up in rural areas, grew up in the South, hard work
Mhm.
they see as the only portal or the only way to elevate yourself out of whatever circumstances you're in. The only way to get yourself
Hey,
out of the
man. Yeah.
dirt.
Good old fashioned American values, you know. Yeah. You know, the heart and soul of American tradition. You know, yeah, no, I get it, man, and that's really the type of work ethic that I think resonates for a community when they look, you know, towards another to be a hero, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because hard work is the one thing that you can preach as much about hard work as you can, but if you lead by example, I don't, in my opinion, there's nothing more impactful than that, than seeing someone truly working hard to achieve a goal.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that becomes infectious. Other
Because it
things that,
represents your own values, right,
mm-hmm,
and what you
yeah,
believe in.
there's not, that's cross cultures. There's not anywhere where hard work doesn't pay off, or hard work isn't a virtue or something you should aspire to do. Other things that they preached or they taught is try to your best to control only what you can control. Growing up in the South as an African American is difficult. There's obviously racism in this country, and specifically in the South. And what they tried to teach Michael and his siblings was that doesn't matter if you can control what you can control and you just work hard. Maybe because of the circumstances, you might have to work harder than other individuals, but you're just work hard and things will come your way out of that hard work. And then always turning negatives into positives. And we've talked about this with regards to reframing, having that negative filter, and it's helpful to have episodes of gratitude in order to get rid of that negative filter, have a positive filter, and then that in turn
There you
creates
go.
momentum. And those are simple things.
Yeah, what you're describing is, you know, self awareness, right? Um, and then the hard work, recognition of the hard work, enthusiasm around like how the hard work is paying off, right? That generates the gratitude, you know, that generates the, you know, the now awareness and understanding of, hey, I'm getting better. And that builds confidence,
Yeah,
and that builds confidence, you know,
exactly.
and that's how the momentum gets going.
Yeah, and as a kid, like we mentioned before, you model after your parents. So if you see your dad working hard at his job, and he comes home and he's working on cars, which oftentimes Michael's Jordan's dad did. Michael's dad would have his tongue out while he worked on cars, so that's where Michael had the patented tongue out when he
Right.
would play. So
Yeah.
so he modeled that hard work. They didn't just preach it; they actually did it in their practices, and he took that to heart. And as a matter of fact, there's stories written about how Michael Jordan, MJ, the GOAT, whatever, he was, they say he was kind of a lazy kid. He didn't like working on cars. He just liked to explore, kind of be a country boy running around in the woods,
Hmm.
cutting down trees, getting into pig pens, getting into fights and doing all these different things that
Yeah.
country boys do. And the other thing that's important to mention is he had four siblings. He had two older brothers. He had one older brother that was just 11 months older than him, and that was Larry Jordan. And this was someone who, for someone, I have a brother that's about 13 months older than me, so I know this. You're kind of attached at the hip early on. You model yourself not only after your parents, but after your older brother. And Michael Jordan's older brother, in this case, super athletic kid. So he's playing sports with him. And this is kind of, I think, initially where he developed that competitive nature, because him and his brothers It would compete with regards to anything and everything.
Yeah.
And rumor has it Larry Jordan was a better ball player than MJ when they
Hey,
were kids.
hey. And the great thing about having siblings, right? They bring out the best in you. You bring out the best in them. You bring out the worst in each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that rough and tumble. It is actually character shaping, especially when it's done in a loving environment. And that character building. One of the things I think it really leads to is this notion of truth, right? Truth and honesty, right? Truth and honesty about who you are, right? Like what your limitations are, what you can and cannot do. Like you keep each other honest
Mm-hmm.
as siblings,
Yeah.
right? That's part of the role.
Yeah.
And but it's important for character development to have these interactions so that when you're now out in the real world, you're working with teams, groups, right? You know who you are
Mm-hmm.
right from the start,
Yep.
and it makes things so much easier.
Exactly. So I think in that sense, Michael Jordan was able to identify who he was, find his identity, find his security as a child growing up in this rural town because he had this strong family unit, this strong holding environment, like we mentioned, this strong anchor. And he had his older brother who was a measuring stick. He competed against him. He knew how well he was doing based off whether or not he could beat his brother. And oftentimes he got beat by his brother. Unfortunately for
Yeah,
his brother only grew to be 5'7", so Michael Jordan ended up overtaking him in
yeah, of
regards
course,
to
yeah,
sports because of that. When he finally outgrew him, but with his parents, with his siblings, that's that strong nucleus. He was able to have these strong social bonds with his family, this strong identity to his where he grew up because he's out exploring in the woods and doing all these different things. So his identity was based in not only just his family, but also his where he grew up.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
those are the foundational pieces for why he became so confident and why he became so secure in himself because of this, and also why he became so competitive because him and his brother and Michael was actually quoted in saying this. I don't think from a competitive standpoint I would be here without the confrontations with my brother. He's talking about Larry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he said,
Yeah.
when you come to blows with someone you absolutely love, that's igniting every fire within you. And I always felt I was fighting Larry for my father's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So those
Hey,
sibling rivalries, man.
actions speak louder than words, and all those kinds of lessons are, are taught, through sibling rivalries, and how like your relationship with your parents is influenced by those things, and and again, it's ultimately character building, as
Mm-hmm.
you said,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's the kind of thing that really influences us at every stage of development. So MJ, I think one thing that's really interesting about his story, a lot of people know about, is the story of how he entered high school, right? So like, if I remember correctly, so he played baseball first
Mm-hmm.
as a young athlete, right?
Oh, he was a
And
stud
then
pitcher.
yeah,
Almost
he
made to Little
was,
League
he
World
was.
Series.
And his dad was all about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really did love baseball and inspired a passion for baseball in MJ. And I don't know, maybe he was so focused on baseball that take he didn't take basketball as seriously because yeah, so he didn't make varsity his sophomore year.
And his best
So
friend at the time did.
oh wow, yeah. So that had to have been tough.
Yeah.
That had
So
to have been tough to do.
that right there, and he's mentioned this, that was like, I think the moment for him, that was a turning point for him. And that's almost where he started developing this hit list, so to speak, where he takes every slight and adds it to as fuel to the fire of his competitive drive. Oh, this coach doesn't think I'm good enough to play on varsity. I'm going to prove him wrong. And guess what he did? He played awesome on the JV. and was brought up to the varsity the next year. Just so happens he grew 4 inches in between his sophomore and junior year. And he was a stud. He was an absolute stud. Come to find out that the coach really just wanted him to play on the JV to act, because he knew he was good, but he wanted him to actually get playing time and develop his skills. So it wasn't just that he didn't see the talent in MJ, but he wanted him to get a little bit more PT. Before we move into the next phase of life, I wanted to, going back to this sibling rivalry. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could go one way or the other. The important thing is, when you're vying for your parents' attention, is how do you get your parents' attention? Is the parent going to give you attention based off something superficial or frivolous, or is your parent going to be someone who, like you said, is dependable and reliable, and staying true to their own words about work ethic? And it's my assumption that his parents gave him validation and attention when they saw that Michael Jordan was, when they saw MJ was working hard and putting in effort, and
Absolutely.
that's that reinforcement. um,
And you can do that through athletics, through sports,
mm-hmm.
through your performance. You can really show what you can do on a court, on a field, with respect to how you perform against peers, especially if you have a parent who's been an athlete themselves or who's been a performer themselves, military person, that's gonna look really good.
Yeah. And in that instance where he gets cut from the varsity team, he comes home, and I read in that he was talking about quitting, crying, and his mom was like, "Hey, it's all about
It's
hard
kind of
work.
heartbreaking.
If you really want it, work for it. I don't want to see you quit."
Yeah,
So,
I wonder how his dad, because what's interesting about MJ and his particular sort of upbringing and development is that he seemed to be a guy, and I think he was I think open about this in the Last Dance series. I think he might have been closer to his dad. I mean, I'm sure he loved his parents both the same. But it seemed like he might have actually had a closer bond or relationship with his father,
yeah.
and maybe even just a kind of a complex attachment, with his dad.
Yeah. His father was
Um,
definitely his anchor throughout the years, was with him everywhere. Um,
yeah,
when he was even in the pros, playing professionally with the Bulls. So, kind of throughout this process, like we mentioned, cut from his team the sophomore year, kind of a late bloomer. He's not someone who has the whole world's attention from day one, like a Zion or a LeBron James. This guy, he had to work hard. So yeah, I mentioned before that my biggest takeaway with regards to Jordan's legacy is that hard work pays off, and that insane drive to win. What about you?
yeah, hard work drive. Yeah, I mean, uh, really, really, really important piece of his legacy. And to me, the most lasting piece would have to be this piece related to honesty.
So for me, I mentioned before, the biggest takeaway I have with regards to Jordan's legacy is that hard work pays off. This is someone who came from a small town, African American guy who became someone that everyone in the world wanted to be. There was a whole slogan, "If I could be like Mike." So that hard
Mm,
work and also that insane drive just to win. Those are my takeaways. What
yeah,
about you? What are your takeaways
yeah,
from his
man.
legacy?
My takeaways, uh, when it comes to what makes him so special, for me, is this notion of his ability to be completely honest with himself, right? Honest with himself, true to himself, true to his values and principles, right? Honest with not only himself, but everyone else around him, right? To the point where, you know, he came into a room, any competition, and he knew who he was, and everyone else did too, right? And once he became a champion, that always carried over, right? He stepped on the floor, he knew he was a champion, and so did his competition. And
Mm,
that honesty,
mm,
that self-awareness, right? That was so important for enabling him to have that intrinsic source of motivation, right? that independent source of motivation that he needed to have in order to be the leader that he was of a great dynasty, in order to bear that burden, right? It's all about integrity, and it comes together, right, packaged very neatly with this hard work and dedication and passion and drive that you're talking about, with this notion of autonomous motivation, right? Autonomous motivation, where you can generate the will to win. Really, you can generate the will to win on your own, right? You don't need an external motivator, a reward, money, cars, whatever, right? It just comes from within.
Hmm. That
And that's what I love about MJ.
yeah, his reward was the feeling he got inside from just beating someone, from just winning.
Yeah, that's right.
He didn't need a
And that's
trophy.
what and it makes sense, right? Because when you were in the gym practicing your ass off after hours, getting it in, the blood, sweat, and the tears, it's the process in the
Yeah.
end, right?
Why in the
It's
world
the
would?
process that is so valuable,
Yeah.
the
Why in the?
hard work and what you put into it.
If you're as good as MJ, why would you be winning when you're doing full court sprints, beating all your teammates in practice, doing suicides? Why would you be playing
Yeah,
horse after practice and beating all your teammates? Why would you be playing cards and wanting to beat all your teammates? Like you're not. What's the benefit in that? No one's watching. He just wanted to do it to win. That's that intrinsic, that autonomous motivation. Whew.
that's right.
And ooh, and at the end of the day, I think the fact that his whole life, the totality of his career and his life, is just this giant example of the hard work, the drive, the autonomous motivation. I think that is something that so many different people, not only just me and you, have fed off of. I want to work harder because of watching this documentary and knowing someone like Michael Jordan exists. I want to work hard. That's his legacy. That's going to be everlasting. That's
Everlasting.
global.
Yeah,
That's
no, for sure.
transcendent. Those are the actions, I think, ultimately that speak louder than words. Those are meaningful actions
Yeah,
that people can see throughout the entire world and country and know that if I work my ass off and I develop this type of drive and intrinsic motivation, I can accomplish anything. And there's nothing more powerful than that, in my opinion.
nothing more powerful, man. And actions always speak louder than words. So why not, end a great career, great legacy with the last dance.
All right,
So with
man.
that, man, how about we end the stigma?
And continue the conversation.